Greetings, System Failure listeners. Nate here with your weekly essay read, this one entitled Walking on Water, and subtitled Christian Iconography Comes from Dynastic Egypt. How does this essay fit within the broader system failure constellation of ideas? The tracking of various astronomical cycles is related to agricultural success and economic sustainability. That's why Christianity borrows symbolism from earlier traditions of sun worship and emphasizes economic justice. Key takeaways. Number 1, the ancient Egyptians worshipped triune gods, a concept later adopted by Christians. Number 2, Egyptian obelisks used to worship the sun are also prominent symbols within Christianity. Number 3, further examples of Christo-Egyptian syncretism include the Christian cross itself and the crown of thorns, both also derived from sun worship. The Trinity. The ancient Egyptians were history's most famous sun worshippers. Because their civilization spanned some 3,000 years, Egyptian mythology had many layers to it. Although the stories and characters evolved considerably during that period, certain themes remained consistent, such as the way they clustered their many gods and goddesses into groups of 3 called triads. The most famous triad from dynastic Egypt included Osiris, Isis, and Horus. Other important examples included the worship of Amun, Mut, and Khonsu in Thebes, and Ta, Sekhmet, and Nefertum in Memphis. These triads typically featured a divine family unit, a father, a mother, and child, often syncretized with major gods like Ra. But the Egyptian affinity for triads is most richly illustrated by their conception of the sun as 3 distinct gods rolled into one, comprising a holy trinity. This trinity centered around Ra, the great father figure and god of the midday sun. His child, Horus, was frequently conceptualized as the morning sun, while Set, the dark god of death and chaos, personified the setting sun. It must be emphasized that the etymologies are entirely coincidental, but it's interesting to note that we still call it a sunset to this day. Similarly, the words hour and horoscope seem to echo a time when the ancients worshipped the morning sun as the child god Horus, who pops into view on the horizon each morning. Dynastic Egypt was a cultural force in the Mediterranean basin for almost 3 millennia, right up until the 3rd century BC, when Alexander arrived to install the Greek Ptolemaic dynasty, which later produced Cleopatra during Roman times. As the centuries wore on, versions of the old Egyptian trinity found its way into Greek Neoplatonism and Roman Christianity. The obelisk. Though the sands of time long ago swallowed up the kingdoms of dynastic Egypt, their architecture is still evident. The Washington Monument that soars over the U.S. Capitol is a prime example of Neo-Egyptian architecture. That structure is a modern copy of the obelisks carved by Egyptians during ancient times. Obelisks are shaped like narrow stone columns that taper to a point. They're designed to mark the daily appearance of Ra, the god of the midday sun. Because these columns stand vertically, the presence of any shadow indicates that the sun isn't directly overhead. But the disappearance of an obelisk's shadow announces the awesome presence of the great god Ra at high noon. Another prominent obelisk stands before St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Rather than being of modern construction like the Washington Monument, this obelisk was originally quarried in Heliopolis, Egypt, during the reign of Pharaoh Amenemhat II in the 20th century BC. In the 1st century AD, the Roman Emperor Caligula ordered this obelisk transported from Egypt to Rome. He had it erected in the Circus of Caligula. His successor Nero expanded the site and renamed it after himself, and later began slaughtering Christians there during the first persecutions in 64 AD. Among them was St. Peter himself. Because of this history, St. Peter's obelisk is sometimes poetically referred to as a witness to his death. In 1586, Pope Sixtus V moved it to the center of St. Peter's Square, where it stands today. At its peak, a cross replaced the bronze orb once thought to hold the ashes of Julius Caesar. It still serves as the gnomon, or shadow-casting stylus, of a sundial mosaic laid out on the pavement stones of the square. St. Peter's obelisk illustrates how these structures are a surprisingly prominent but often overlooked symbol in Christianity, especially within Catholicism. The cross. Early Christians adopted existing religious allegories to make their message as comprehensible as possible to the populations of the Mediterranean basin whom they hoped to convert. Trinities and obelisks are far from the only features of Egyptian sun worship they borrowed. The cross itself is yet another example. A circle sliced into 4 equal quadrants is a near universal symbol for a calendar year divided into 4 seasons. From the Native American medicine wheel to Stonehenge in the UK to dynastic Egypt, this shape has symbolized the sun's annual cycle since time immemorial. Many Christian traditions over the past 2,000 years have represented their faith with a circle and a cross. By elongating the shaft, and in some cases removing the circle, early Christians transformed an old symbol to look like the infamous execution device common to Roman society. Some crosses even retained the circular background, like the Celtic cross and later the Presbyterian cross. Another striking example is the crown of thorns. The Egyptians depicted their sun god Ra with a large red sun disk over his head. The Greek version of Ra, Helios, wore a radiant crown that also evoked the sun's rays. The Colossus of Rhodes was a giant bronze statue of Helios, complete with a spiked crown. And because the Statue of Liberty was based on the Colossus, she also wears the solar crown. This tradition explains why astronomers named the outermost layer of the sun's atmosphere the corona, which is Latin for crown. Christians incorporated this symbolism into their faith when they modified the sun discs of dynastic Egypt into the round halos of Christian iconography. Meanwhile, the radiant crown of Helios became the gruesome crown of spiked thorns placed upon the head of the Christian Savior. Conclusion. The layers of solar imagery borrowed from Egypt by early Christians are numerous and varied. From the notion of triune gods to the obelisk to the cross and the crown of thorns, much of the Christian iconography so familiar to us has its roots in dynastic Egypt. Where they once worshipped the sun, Christians now worship the sun in yet another etymological coincidence. Ancient sun gods were said to linger on water because the sun's rays reflected off its surface. Anyone who's ever enjoyed a sunrise or a sunset over water can appreciate the beautiful effect. Naturally, Jesus follows suit. But where the Egyptian sun god Ra was believed to have traversed the sky in a boat, Jesus prefers to walk. Alrighty, folks. Well, that's it for this week's audio essay. Hope you enjoyed it. If you do, point your internet browser to systemfailure.org and pay us a little visit there. At systemfailure.org, you can view the text version of this essay, which includes many pictures, and also the new and exciting Sub Rosa Club, which is at the end of each and every text version of the essay. Again, you can find it all at systemfailure.org, and you can sign up to receive the text versions of these essays every single Sunday morning right there in your email inbox. Okay, well, I will be back on Monday with another regularly scheduled edition of the System Failure Podcast with Brian. In the meantime, I hope you all are having a great week.